The Boston Tea Party, one of the most iconic acts of defiance in American history, took place on the evening of December 16, 1773. But what really happened that night, and why did it become such a pivotal moment in the lead-up to the American Revolution? Let's break it down. The roots of the Boston Tea Party lie in the tension between the American colonies and the British government. By the 1770s, Britain had imposed a series of taxes on the colonies, most notably the Townshend Acts, which taxed goods like paper, glass, and tea. Colonists viewed these taxes as unfair, especially because they had no representation in the British Parliament, hence the famous phrase, "no taxation without representation." In response to colonial protests, Britain repealed most of the taxes, but they left the tax on tea as a symbol of their authority to tax the colonies. To make matters worse, the Tea Act of 1773 allowed the British East India Company to sell its tea directly to the colonies, undercutting local merchants and reinforcing the idea that Britain had control over colonial commerce. Colonists were outraged by the Tea Act, not because tea prices were too high, in fact they were lowered, but because it represented Britain's ongoing control over colonial affairs. Resistance grew, particularly in Boston, where the Sons of Liberty, a group of rebellious patriots, began organizing protests. When 3 ships, the Dartmouth, Eleanor, and Beaver, arrived in Boston Harbor carrying large shipments of British tea, tensions reached a boiling point. Governor Thomas Hutchinson insisted that the tea be unloaded and the tax paid, while the colonists demanded that the ships be sent back to Britain without unloading the tea. On the night of December 16, 1773, a group of about 60 men, led by the Sons of Liberty, took matters into their own hands. Dressed as Mohawk Indians to disguise their identities, they boarded the ships in the harbor. In a swift and organized act of rebellion, they dumped 342 chests of tea, worth about 10,000 pounds at the time, equivalent to over $1 million today, into Boston Harbor. This wasn't a chaotic riot, it was a carefully planned protest. The participants ensured that only the tea was destroyed, and they left the ships otherwise intact. It was a symbolic act, meant to demonstrate colonial resistance to British control, especially over economic matters. While the Boston Tea Party was a bold statement, it didn't immediately lead to war. However, the British government responded harshly with the Coercive Acts, also known as the Intolerable Acts, which included closing Boston Harbor until the lost tea was paid for and imposing military rule on the colony. Far from quelling the rebellion, these acts only united the colonies further against Britain. The outrage spread, leading to the formation of the First Continental Congress in 1774 and eventually the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War in 1775. The Boston Tea Party wasn't just about tea, it was about standing up against a government that the colonists felt had overstepped its bounds. What might seem like a simple protest became a catalyst for revolution, setting the stage for the fight for independence. The truth is, this act of defiance wasn't just a rowdy night in Boston. It was a turning point in American history, leading to the birth of a new nation. And that's the truth about the Boston Tea Party.